create a PowerPoint pitch deck. What is a PowerPoint pitch deck and why is it important? A PowerPoint pitch deck is something that describes what your company does, what problems that you're solving, and it presents it in a very small, concise, and colorful way to very busy individuals that do not have time to read an entirely detailed business plan. So it's very important to have all the information that you want to provide and you want to communicate to a potential reader so that they get as much information as possible as to what you're trying to do. So what makes a good PowerPoint pitch deck? Well, overall, there are key components that a PowerPoint pitch must have. And these are essential items that definitely describe exactly what a business needs to describe itself in order to just make sure that there's an information exchange. So you need to be able to describe the problem. You need to be able to describe the vision or what you plan to do after you establish the company, the unique value proposition, the milestones, the business model, your competitions, and finally, and this is very important, your ask. So let's start with every component and as to what makes a really good pitch deck going forward. So the first thing that you need to basically describe is the problem. So every business starts from the problem, not the solution. So we need to describe what the problem is. And what makes a good problem is, first of all, you need to basically describe how many people or how many individuals have this specific problem. So the more people there are, the better it becomes. What is the problem costing? So if you have any details as to what is the cost of that problem, it's also a good idea to put it in your PowerPoint pitch deck. What are your current customers trying to solve that are trying to solve the problem? So if they're trying to solve the problem, it may not necessarily be a good solution. It may not necessarily be a very cheap solution. So you need to describe the current solution and how ineffective or how not as good as it can potentially be. So one of the things that you have to remember when you're describing the problem is it should be evidence-based. So if you can find any literature that describes the extent of the problem, it's also a good idea to have it. You can also use this opportunity to tell a story. Most business ideas come from nowhere, and usually it's because of a problem that you definitely have. So you can start by telling the specific problem and relating it to you or to anybody that you know that inspired you to tell this problem is a good way to start and to basically include in your pitch deck. So how do we know that a specific problem is a good problem to start a business with? So these metrics, for example, a popular problem are a good area to start with. If everybody has that problem or a lot of individuals have this problem, then you have a lot of potential customers. So that gets investors interested in that specific problem. And then the urgency of the problem. So if the problem is not very urgent and people are not necessarily rushing towards solving that specific problem or organizations aren't trying to solve this problem, then it's not necessarily a good problem to start with. But if it's an urgent problem, like in healthcare issues or certain areas where the problem needs to be solved as soon as possible, that becomes a really good point to basically start a business with. And then the frequency of the problem. So you may have a popular problem that may be urgent, but that's not very frequent. And frequency is very important. For example, if you're trying to sell a Christmas decoration shop, if you're trying to get a Christmas decoration shop and that specific holiday comes only once a year, as you know, then it's not really a frequent problem, which means you only have customers for a specific season. So technically, that's not really a good business to start with. But a frequent problem, a problem that occurs frequently and regularly, usually is a cause for people to go seek the solution, and hence they are more likely to be your potential customers. So you're telling the investor that this problem is vast and that it's urgent and that it's frequent. It may not necessarily be all three things, but having these qualities will definitely help your business be accepted and get a lot of investors. The vision is what comes after the problem. So the vision statement is something that captures the business, what the business is aiming to achieve. So this needs to be a very concise, very short amount of words, and you need to be able to describe what the vision of your company is. It's a one-sentence summary of what your company is and what value that it produces. So focus on that vision, take your time, and basically articulate that vision very well. And then we go on to the value proposition. So the value proposition is the value that you're adding or the value that you're selling. So that is the thing that you're definitely pitching, and that's the center of what you have. So when you're describing your value proposition, you have to make sure that you describe what advantages that your value proposition provides, why your customers choose this specific product or service that you're offering as opposed to the competitors, the key benefits that your product provide to the customers. And also, you have to be able to provide the insights to your value proposition, as in, is there room for this specific market and for your business to grow? Is there a market that is suitable for your business to grow? So when you describe all of these things and when you describe the value proposition, then you have communicated well what you're planning to do and what you're planning to sell. So once you basically communicate that idea, then you have to show the milestones. So the milestones are a set of activities that culminate into one chapter of your business development. So you may have gone through that business and have gone halfway there, or a third of the way there, or it may be just an idea. So you need to be able to show, if you were to be given the chance to do this business, or you're currently doing this business, in how many milestones are you doing it, and what are these timelines, what are your accomplishments so far. So this is technically used to show the evaluators or the investors how much where you are of that specific sector, what you need to do to transform an idea into a reality, or to take the idea that you have or the progress that you have and take it to the next level. And that definitely helps in the planning and also evaluating whether this is a viable business plan or not. And then once you're done with that, you basically describe the business model. So the business model, the best way to describe the business model is through a business model canvas. You can go online and check a lot of resources that explain what a business model canvas is, what are the elements, and why it's important. So the importance of a business model is to just basically give you the fundamental, because it answers the fundamental questions as to what your business needs in order to basically operate. It needs to answer the following questions. It needs to answer the key activities, as in what activities do you need to perform well, and who are going to be your key partners, especially in the value chain, especially because you're not going to produce everything from scratch. You need partners that give you the raw materials, or partners that will give you customers. And also you need to show what resources or infrastructure that you need in order to create, deliver, and capture the specific value. And what is the value proposition, as in a repeat sentence of exactly what you're trying to sell. Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it both? And then there's also the customer segment. So who are you trying to sell this product to? Now it can be companies, it can be individuals, and if it's individuals, are they students? Are they working individuals? Are they university students, or are they well-income individuals? Are they poor-income individuals? So you need to clarify based on the characteristics of the thing that you're trying to sell, who your segment is. And then what is your cost structure, as in what is going to cost you money in order to just basically do this business and then start this business and then operate this business. And then what are your revenue streams? How are you planning to generate revenue? And what is the modality with which you're generating revenue? Is it based on subscription basis? Is it a transactional basis? Is it a one-time fee? Or is it after usage fee? So you need to describe how you're planning to collect money. And also it can also be advertising. It can be a combination of all these things that I've mentioned in order to generate revenue from your business. And then what is the kind of relationship that you're going to have with your customers? So is it going to be a long-term connection, or is it going to be a short-term relationship? And at the same time, how will you acquire these customers and how will you retain them? So once you have all these details in the business model canvas and you basically provide that, an evaluator or an investor would see that and would easily understand what you're trying to communicate. So in very small, in just one slide, you'd be able to describe everything that you need to in order for someone else to understand what you're trying to do, your vision, and what you're trying to accomplish, so that they can easily either cooperate with you or not. And then there's also a competition. So most of the time there are other organizations or other companies that are currently trying to solve the very same problem that you're trying to solve. But it doesn't mean that your value proposition is unique. You need to be able to show how your competition are solving this specific problem and where the shortcomings are, or more specifically, what makes your product or service better than the competition. Is it because it's priced less than the rest of the competition? Is it because it delivers a better quality product or a better quality service than your competition? Or are there any other factors that definitely factor into the decision making of customers when considering your value proposition as opposed to the competition's value proposition? So when you mention that, they also know, they will also have an understanding as to what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it, so they would understand if this is also a good business venture to go into or what. And then when we continue, there's also the team. Now, most of the time, the pitch decks that we see a picture and the teammate's name, and then that's it. But when you're trying to give the teammate profile, there are several things that you need to be very careful of. The first of all, you need to mention the co-founders and the founders. You don't need to mention everyone in the team. You just need to mention individuals that are currently leading the specific team, if there are a lot of individuals. But usually startups are a team of 4 or 5 at most, so technically everybody can be mentioned there. And then you have to mention the roles in the team. One person may be CEO, one person may be COO, one person may be in charge of finances, and the other may be in charge of the technology it serves. And so you need to be able to mention those roles as well. And then once you mention those roles, you need to also mention some background. So what is their background education-wise? Do they have any specific capabilities as to why they're in that specific position? If you say one person is a CEO, what leadership positions has this person held before for that person to be CEO? If that person is a CTO, then do they have the technical capacity to basically get it done? Is there anything in their past experiences that tells you, well, they've done something like this, so they can definitely deliver? So the idea of you basically mentioning the team structure is not only does it show that your team is structured as its own, but at the same time, it also shows that your team is capable of driving that specific business because they have some kind of background that just basically shows that they're capable of doing what needs to be done in order to make sure that the company gets to where it is. And then finally, there's the ask. Okay, your ask is very important. Now, you can ask for finances, you can ask for specific things, but it's very important that you are very specific and strategic with what you ask. Not everything you require is about money. But this also gives the opportunity for investors and evaluators to see how well you understand the business enough to know to basically ask for the very right things that are required for that business to thrive. And your understanding of it is very important, and them understanding what you need or what you're lacking is also important, because if they have the resources that you need, they will provide that because they are interested. And if they don't, even if they are interested, they will let you know that they're not interested. But you being vague in this particular scenario does not help you or the evaluators. Being very specific, being very strategic is a very good way to begin to just basically start the conversation with the potential investors. And then finally, let's discuss some of the common mistakes that a lot of startups make when they're preparing their pitch decks. One of the things that we see very commonly is very unprofessional presentations. So poor layouts are not necessarily a good thing, because you want to visually attract whoever is reading this, and people usually tend to be distracted when the layout is not good. And when you're using low quality graphics as well, it becomes really difficult to read or to see the picture, and so people don't really spend a lot of time trying to see it. In fact, they just rather skip to the next one, which is something we definitely want to avoid. We also don't want to put in confusing charts. We want to make things as simple, as clear, and as small as possible. So the more confusing it becomes, the more likely that people will not understand what you're trying to convey, even if it's a good idea. So the idea is you have a good idea, and then you convey it as clearly and as easily as possible. Inconsistent fonts and styles are considered unprofessional in this particular area, because you want to be consistent with how you do this. Even when you're presenting in class, or even in normal situations, that you want to be consistent with the kind of fonts and the styles that you have. You have to also provide very realistic projections. Sometimes a lot of companies, they get very ambitious and they just basically give very high unrealistic projections. And these are definitely not a good idea, because investors can tell certain projections are not necessarily realistic, so they kind of tend to question your knowledge in that specific area, which is not something we want, especially when being evaluated. And then in comprehensive writing, sometimes people write so many complex things that it's really difficult to follow up. And so that's a very bad idea. Very small words, very, very small, clear, and straightforward language is what is preferred. We don't need to see complicated languages, and using very complex words that does not necessarily make your presentation or your pitch deck better. But providing the context as directly as possible is one thing you can do that definitely helps you. And the other thing you don't want to do is information overload. Now, when you're considering of starting a company, there are a lot of things that you you definitely have plans, and your business plan by itself is going to be very intense and very meticulous. But right now, when you're preparing a PowerPoint pitch deck, all of these things are not necessarily important. So aside from the things that we've mentioned, a lot of details are things that come afterwards. Once evaluators or investors read your pitch deck and they're interested in what you're trying to do, they will ask you to come back and give them more explanation, which is a good thing. That's when you basically give them as much information as you can. But when you're doing the introduction phase and you're trying to communicate with investors, it's a good idea to just give them the basic information and not to overload them with information so that they do not get bored or they don't miss all the important things that they need to be checking out. And the one thing that also needs to be given value for is the number of slides that you put in. Now, there could be a lot of information and you may need multiple slides to convey one idea, but it's also a good idea to make sure that you limit the number of slides that you have to a maximum of 15 slides, because more than 15 slides becomes a lecture note, and lecture notes are not necessarily the way you want to go when pitching an idea. There are other additional contents that you may be interested in adding that are not necessarily part of this, and it's always a good idea if you think that it's important that evaluators or the investors need to see. So one of them is financial projection. So if you've done a financial projection, it's a good idea to put it in there. If you have a demonstration, if you have a prototype, and whatever stage that you're at, that there's something that you want to show, or a picture of a product or a service that you're trying to show, it's also a good idea to just put it there. And if you have any legal disclaimers, if you have contracts with other organizations pending this specific area, that's also a good idea to put it in there. So once you have all of these and you make a good PowerPoint pitch deck, it's very easy for people to understand and follow, and it's very easy for people to want to be interested, especially if you have a good idea. Thank you very much.